Justice.
Oh, there is a lag, yeah. And you want us in general looking at the phones?
Or each other's. Whatever is more natural.
Look at Luke. I already spent the morning with Corey looking at him.
This one?
Yeah, we blended all day.
30 people watching right now. So.
Yeah.
How many?
30.
So we're gonna give it a little bit longer. So we're not. Are we live yet?
Yeah.
We are. So they're just seeing us on there.
We're live and they can hear us. You guys, we're just gonna give everyone a couple minutes to join us.
Oh, this is cool.
Yeah. So all the whites.
Oh, but
got
these are all like secret code names.
I'll know. I'll
You know
about
these
these
people?
people. Yeah.
The data doc, I
you
know who
who
that
it
is.
Yeah.
Oh, there's a great. Lord have mercy. There's a great one. Raina's tapestry is a great backdrop for this. It's also a little Stephen King-esque.
For any of you guys joining us right now, we're just gonna give everyone a couple minutes to get on Instagram or Facebook.
It's gonna annoy me.
Oh, yeah. Are you on Instagram or Facebook? This is Instagram. I can watch it on Facebook too. No, I can't. It's not logged in there.
Welcome yourselves.
We're gonna have people joining us from all over. Had people messaging me today from the Caribbean who are gonna be trying to join. Where else? Florida.
This one, Facebook.
This setup definitely leads you to want to look down
Right.
at
Tiffany.
these pads instead of the
Yeah,
Right.
definitely.
That's okay. North Carolina.
Right.
That's whatever.
I see the employees are signing in.
Looks like the carrot.
Stay hydrated.
Alright. And we'll give everyone just a couple more minutes to join us. Hi from Florida. Just so everyone joining us knows, we are broadcasting live right now to both Instagram and Facebook. So if you see us saying hi to people you don't see or answering questions that you don't see pop up, that's probably the reason there. So North Dakota tuning in. Oh, that's Mike's daughter. Yeah. Cassie, your father's hiding behind the camera today.
Stick your head in here for a second, man. Say hi to her.
Cassidy, Michael, Brett.
You gotta read
What?
the uniform.
What am I doing? Oh, I'm not even in there yet.
No, it's a lag, remember?
I'm sorry.
Hey, social distancing. Social distancing.
There you are.
Oh, well, there am I. All right, kids. Love you. Glad you guys can join. Wow, that's a big lag, huh? That's going to be hard to look at that and then try to talk. Good luck, guys.
Nate Smith joining on. What's up, bud? Joe Glomsky.
Whoa.
Oh.
Joe Mofsky.
All right. How far in are we?
Couple
Let me
minutes.
give people another minute or so.
How many have joined so far?
125.
Impressive.
Kind of interesting today. Like started off super blue and then got really gloomy all day. And then
Yeah.
It seemed like it was gonna rain.
What's funny is me and my daughters were camping last night and it rained on us in the middle of the night. It was a light sprinkle, but then we woke up, it was full sun. Shiloh was swimming in the river and
Where'd you guys go camping?
we went out just on national land in between here and Sedona.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
We camped earlier in the week and we got like 2 perfect days. Like the wildflower blooms right now are just insane. Have you been out towards Sycamore at all lately?
Yeah. I brought the girls out there and
Those purple mustards blooming everywhere.
yeah, it's out of control. It's surreal.
I heard about that. I was going to go out there probably
Yeah,
tomorrow.
Andy sent around that picture of them.
Yeah, it's crazy, man.
Yeah,
People still joining, or are we good to roll?
People are still joining, but I am ready to roll. What's up, Jessica Smith? Ready to roll?
Sure, let's do it, man.
All right. Just in time for our buddy Champagne Bacchus to join. That's Justin.
Justin, good to
from
see you, bro.
Ace of Spades. He's one of our guys. All right, and just to remind you, we have monitors down here, but these are people up here. So,
Okay. Wait, can I just wait a minute?
Oh, this guy.
Go ahead.
Oh, Eric's throwing stuff.
Oh, now I'm off the edge here.
Instant karma, man. Well, welcome everybody. We are extremely happy to have you guys here live on Instagram and Facebook. We are into our second session of doing these live tastings right now, and it's kind of an interesting new world for us, but it's also exciting and it's fun to do something new as well. So we are extremely happy to have you guys with us and to have you guys supporting us as well. Crazy times for us with our business and a lot of moving parts and a lot to it. So thank you guys for being involved. This is huge for us. I'm sitting alongside Eric Glomsky. Most of you guys know Eric. I started working for Eric in 2011. I had known him for not long, less than a year, and I've worked here ever since. This guy is like a brother to me, and has really introduced me to this this world of wine. So, Eric Glomsky.
Yeah, thanks, man. And I'm sitting next to Luke Bernard. Like Luke said, he's doing this a long time. He's worn a ton of different hats. I believe he started in the vineyards, actually over with Maynard, right?
Correct.
And then you moved over to ours. You worked in the tasting room during the Corey Turnbull era of tasting room shenanigans. And then
That was my nice warm welcome.
yeah, moved from there into kind of more of a kind of artistic sales and marketing role at our company. And so if you guys have seen any like the really cool designs coming out here, t-shirts, everything like that, you would have seen some of Luke's stuff for sure. And then and those of you who know me well, and there's a lot of wine club members and family watching right now, you know that I'm unabashedly ignorant of social media. And it's been a while since I've been kind of live on film. I think Blood into Wine was 10 years ago or something.
Over 10 years ago, yeah.
Yeah, so this is really cool. It's a lot of fun for me, and I'm looking forward to doing this. And I'm glad that we're still able to reach out despite the fact that our doors are closed. So
yeah,
let's do it.
Again, thanks for joining us. We're probably gonna have people joining throughout the session, and we'll try to answer any questions if you guys throw them on there. But we got a lot of activity. So just to kind of address the current climate, the current situation with the coronavirus and all of this, we have been adjusting appropriately as much as possible with our distancing and the way that we operate our business here. We are still open to certain regards. We have a to-go window. We have acres and acres of property, trail systems that link into the local Audubon bird area, important birding area. And if anyone's been on our property before, you would know that it's not that hard to keep your space from other people. So we are doing glass and bottle services out of our to-go window. We're doing to-go food. We are running all kinds of specials on our website. We are doing specials on site, and this virtual tasting is one of these new programs that's kind of fitting into all of the activity around here. We understand that most of you are in your living room, in your kitchen, in your house, with your family. So this is really nice to be able to join you virtually, engage with you, and taste through some delicious wines.
I heard that DUIs are on the drop.
I'd
It's
say-
so cool that everybody can just be at home and enjoy this, and seriously not have to worry about driving, not have to worry about anything. This is perfect.
Yeah, I think crime in general is down, right?
For now.
Yeah. What we're going to do here with you is we're going to taste through 3 different wines. I would assume that there's a number of people joining us live who do not have these wines with us. It should still be a great experience. We're really going to taste through them and just try to explain our insights about these wines and just kind of showcase our connection with them. We're going to taste through a rosé and then follow that with 2 different reds. I assume that there's at least one of you following that hasn't chilled your rosé. So if you have the time to run and go throw it in the freezer for a little bit, that might be wise. Otherwise, drinking whites and rosés super cold is a little overrated, I believe, anyway, which we can talk about. What else before we get into the wine? Any of you who have made it on the property will probably notice that it is not quiet around here. There are endless projects always happening here at Page Spring Cellars, and most of them are kind of done when we're not open, when our tasting room's closed, not on the weekends. We try to keep them out of everyone's face. Right now, with everything being shut down, we're basically knocking out a million different projects right now. Any that you want to touch on? Maybe like the...
Yeah, I mean, one of our Inner Circle members, who's probably watching right now, actually Dan and Julie King, if you guys have ever seen our solar photovoltaic array, those guys just helped us. Their company's Harman Solar. When you'll notice that we have new panels on the main building as well. So we're 100% photovoltaic now, which is pretty exciting. Down below the parking area, you'll see a new storage barn going in. We just have all kinds of things stored outside in the weather, and honestly, it's UV that's a bigger issue. So we're about to start stashing everything that you see laying around the property inside. Our members area, the long, promised members area, is perking along, and we hope to have our final approvals from the county shortly, and hopefully this summer we will have that open for all the wine club members. And you'll also see just all kinds of simple little improvements in the property. We put in new signage. We've got 3 interpretive signs going in. One of them, which is down by the river deck right now, actually shows our whole trail system and the links to trail systems next door. So especially right now, it's like, visit that sign, you can't miss it. It's near the gate that goes down to the river, and it shows all the trail systems within a mile. So
Yeah.
some pretty cool stuff.
Yeah, so hopefully when all the dust settles and we can open our doors, there's gonna be a lot of things in place that you'll be able to take advantage of. I'd say the members area is one of the more exciting for me to see, getting really close to being there. On that note, I want to thank all of our members within our wine club for the support that you've provided for us. In the last 3 weeks or so, the wine club has stepped up huge as a support system for us. A lot of discussions about what's happening, a lot of discussions about wines in personal collections. You can always reach out to us, call us, email us, or hit us on Instagram or Facebook with any of those questions. But again, thanks to everyone that supports us, but a special thank you to our wine club. So thank you guys. Do you maybe want to get in some wines?
Let's drink some wines.
All right. So again, you guys, we're going to start tasting through some wines here. We'll start with the rosé. We're going to move on to the 2 different reds. Maybe we'll give everyone just a quick 30 seconds to grab a wine key if you need it. Grab your bottle of rosé out of the fridge, and get ready to drink some vino with us. So,
You know what? I'll just add a couple things organically that I just thought about.
sure.
It's funny when I try to become conscious of all the things that I do that are automatic for me these days. I'm sure, none of us are doing this now, but whenever you're dining out or even in your own home, I think it's always good to smell your glass beforehand. I can't tell you how many times I've been at a restaurant and I smell the glass and it smells like chlorine or soap. Sometimes I even see residue of chemicals on it from the washing.
Cardboard's a huge one. A lot of
Cardboard's,
them, they're coming
yeah.
straight out of cardboard boxes.
So and these glasses are immaculate, but just a little bit of water in them, shake them, rinse them out, and make sure they're dry before you taste can always help.
Ours just smell like air right now, mostly. Just getting on the nose. Sorry, go ahead.
No, it's all good. Depends on what kind of air it is. This is Page Springs air, really good air. So, do you want to open, or do you want me to open the first one, or?
Yeah, I can start opening if you want to
Okay.
start.
So,
you can enter the wine.
well, yeah, you guys check it out. We're gonna taste the Counoise Rosé first. It's from House Mountain Vineyard, and we have a set little group of things that we do to open wines and present them, and there's a kind of a whole story in and of that. Have you ever seen those little kind of cutters where you put them on the top and they actually cut the foil off above the rim? I've never been fond of those because what tends to happen is when you pour the wine, it then gets behind the foil. One of the cool things, and you'll see what like Luke just did, is cutting just below the rim here. And for me at least, I usually use the tip of the knife and cut below the rim and then peel it off. That way it still leaves a nice presentation of the foil, but it also gets rid of any chance of it really leaking down and then draining down the bottle. And then of course you'll notice we have a synthetic cork too. We are going to go 100% synthetic cork starting with the 2019 vintage. We just, every bottle of wine that has a problem up here in our tasting room goes down to our lab and our winemaking team looks at it. And unfortunately, we just see too many bottles that are messed up from natural corks. These particular corks are fully recyclable. They're made from sugarcane, sustainably produced sugarcane. And over the last 5 years, we've seen hundreds, maybe even thousands, probably 1,000 plus bottles that are messed up from natural cork. We've seen one messed up from these. So it's pretty important to me, to just, we spend all this time making this wine, the last thing we want to do is have a cork mess it up at the last minute. The other really cool thing about these corks is you can get them in different densities. So, if you take the one we use, this is kind of for the rosé, is a medium density cork that's perfectly suited for early drinking wines. But if let's say we wanted to age a wine longer, we could get a denser cork and it would actually slow the aging process in the bottle. So the cool thing is cork technology is now developing in a spectrum where, here's the early release, very porous ones, the wine ages quick, all the way over to the really dense ones for the older ones, the ones you want to hold on to for a long time, which I personally think is cool.
Yeah, my kind of take on synthetics has changed a lot over the years of drinking wine, and maybe in hand with the quality of wine that is actually having a synthetic cork in it as well. I'm pretty ritualistic with the way I go about my life, and there is something about pulling a cork out of a bottle that I appreciate a lot more than a screw cap. I've had just as good wine out of a screw cap bottle as I have a corked bottle. It's just kind of the ritual of opening that bottle that is a kind of a bigger deal to me. And I remember when I first started drinking wine, pulling out some really dense, nasty synthetic corks and just not really loving the feel, it being part of the experience. And these synthetic corks
They're called Noma corks.
Noma corks, yeah, which are these sugarcane byproducts, are really kind of changing my perception on synthetic corks in general. So pretty exciting for us.
Okay, so hopefully people by now have some wine in their glass. I poured, another really interesting thing is my grandmother, who passed away about a year ago, used to give me a hard time if I didn't fill up the glass so that there was a positive meniscus over the top. And in fact, she called me a chintzy bastard once because I only filled it up with 10 ounces. I personally like that.
That's where you get that from?
I know. I personally... Can I get that measuring tape back? I personally like to have, an ounce and a half to 2 ounces in my glass because, for one thing, it lets me swirl it. And, and I'm not trying to be pretentious at all. I basically just love drinking wine. But one of the great things about swirling, if you don't know this, is that it liberates volatile molecules that basically liberates smell, so you can kind of dig on them more in your glass. And don't be shy right now. Get your nose in there. If you didn't chill your rosé, it's probably going to be a little more aromatic than if you did. The colder it is, the less likely those molecules are to jump out at you. But the chilled rosé will have a crisper, cleaner palate than the one that's a little warmer. So really, it comes down to what you like. If you want to throw an ice cube in there like my grandmother did, go for it.
You want to tell them what vintage?
Yeah. So this is the 2018 Counoise rosé from House Mountain. And there's always a lot of stories. Maybe one of the big ones is how do we make rosé? There's a lot of different approaches. On one end of the spectrum, you can take white wines and blend red wines in with them and create a rosé. On the other end, you could do something called Saignée. Saignée is really common in France, particularly places where they make Pinot Noir. And what they do is they put all the grapes in the vat that they're going to make the red wine from, And the Saunier is the juice that basically liberates itself on its own under the weight of the grapes. So it's the Saunier or the sangre, the blood of the grapes. When you pump that juice out, you put that pink juice in a tank and ferment it. Meanwhile, the red fermentation of, let's say, Pinot Noir now has more skins to juice, so it makes a darker Pinot. So the Saunier and the Rosé process developed really out of trying to make darker Pinot Noir, for instance. In between, you have what we did here, which basically we made this wine like a white wine. We loaded red grapes, in this case Counoise, into our press, and we pressed it gently, just enough to get the juice out and get a little bit of color from the skins, and then we pumped that juice into a stainless steel tank and we fermented it cold. Okay, red wines we generally allow to ferment warm because we're extracting color from the skins. On these, all we're doing is juice, and we're trying to hold aromatics in, so we ferment it very cold in a stainless steel tank. A red ferment might take 3 to 5 days. This one probably took about a month. And the great thing now is if you get your nose in there, you'll notice all these beautiful, pretty aromatics. And I'm really not one to tell people what they're perceiving. I can share what I get out of this. I think sniffing it first, and then always, getting it in your mouth, obviously, is awesome. If you're good at drawing air through your mouth, that helps volatilize things and getting it up into your sinuses so you smell more. The other thing I always do right at the beginning, if I ever drink anybody's rosé, first thing I look at is the alcohol content. This is 12.7. By French standards, that might be just about right or just a tad high. By U.S. standards, it's probably a little on the low side. For me, the last thing you want in a dry rosé is to feel the heat of the alcohol. Alcohol should be background. Rosé should be all about crispness, aromatics, prettiness, and the ability for this to go with food without overpowering with alcohol. So, just a few quickies on that. And then, of course, the grape Counoise. Counoise is one of the quote-unquote minor grapes in the Rhone. If you do genetic or just, historic research on the grape Counoise, there's very little information on it. If you compare it to Grenache or Syrah, which we're going to taste today, there's volumes of information, genetic research, historic research on these grapes, almost nothing on Counoise. And genetic research doesn't really show any real direct parentage. So that basically means that this is a very old grape, and not a lot of manipulation and crossbreeding and things like that have gone on over time. And generally speaking, it doesn't make very dark red wines. For us, the reason we started making rosé out of this is because Counoise is also one of our latest ripening grapes. So in the particular year where we first started making rosé, guess what? Basically we didn't get it ripe, and we were looking at it and we're going, we're not going to make a great red wine, let's try rosé out of it. And it ended up being by far our favorite rosé of all time around here. And so every year now, we basically do the same thing. We pick it early, we crop it reasonably high because we don't need to get it super ripe, and it makes this beautiful, lithe, kind of crisp, aromatic rosé.
Yeah, this rosé came to be a couple years after I started working here. We had a vineyard manager at the time who is now one of the owners over at Chateau Tumbleweed. And I remember hearing the debate about picking this Counoise lighter versus later, and kind of what Eric's talking about with the whole winemaking process of making rosé. But we've only been making this Counoise rosé for maybe 4 years, I would say. Yeah. Personally, I would say it's one of my favorite wines that we make across the board. For me, rosé is kind of funny. There's this kind of trendy thing about rosé right now, which actually makes me not want to like it, but not enough for me to not like it. So there is a lot of really crappy rosé out there. There's also a lot of really good rosé out there. And the trendiness behind rosé in general increases the opportunity to purchase either one. You just have to look for one and stay away from the other. So there's a lot of really good rosé out there. And I would say, as part of our identity as a region, as a state of Arizona, I believe that dry rosé is kind of one of our bigger signature plays, one of our cards in hand.
Well, it's funny too because I've been making dry rosés, Le Fleur Rose, ever since we opened our doors. and I swear I could not give this stuff away for like the first 7-8 years. I'd make 100 cases a year. At the end of the year, I think I probably drank more of it than anybody else. And then all of a sudden, in the last 2 or 3 years, all of a sudden, dry rosé is hot, and it's awesome because number one, it's an incredibly versatile wine, but it is, to be completely honest, it's allowed us to charge just a little bit more for it too, because it does require more effort. In general, white wines require a lot more effort than red wines. We need more technology. We need cooling. We have filtration. This is a completely filtered wine because we don't allow this to go through its secondary or malolactic fermentation. Because if you let it go through, first it goes through a yeast fermentation, and then you inoculate it with a bacteria that metabolizes all the malic acid and turns it into lactic acid, and it softens the wine. We do that with all of our reds, but we don't do it with most of our whites or our rosés because we want to keep them crisp. But the problem is that bacteria is everywhere in the air. If it gets into the wine, it's going to carbonate on you. So not only is this pressed and then cold fermented for long periods of time where it takes up lots of tank real estate, then it has to be specially filtered and put in bottle that same moment that you filter it. And then meanwhile, over time, you sell it for next to nothing because nobody wants it. Well, finally, people want it, and rosé is getting the notoriety that it should. So.
Yeah, I think one of the coolest things about just wine as a daily item is just how many options there are out there, and how conditional life is, and how there's kind of an option to fall into place with whatever you have going on. I am from the East Coast. Actually, I'm from the East Coast as well, but I only really drank red wine before I moved to Arizona. And when I moved to Arizona, all of a sudden I just wanted a chilled beverage, and it kind of led me down the path of drinking white wines and drinking rosés. And now I would say that my appreciation for rosés and whites has met my appreciation for red wines as well. So to each their own, but there is a time and place for rosé for sure.
I hope you guys are digging this. I mean, get your nose in there, swirl it. I mean, to me, this is just so good.
Do you maybe want to give them? Maybe we could do a little sensory run on this. You want to?
Yeah, I mean, so again, I'll give you a classic example. Just the other day, I was talking with somebody about cilantro. Cilantro is like the classic trust your palate kind of thing, which was one of our mottos. I love cilantro. I love it in Mexican food. I love it in Thai food. It's aromatic. It's delicious. But as you may or may not know, some people, when they taste cilantro, they get soap, like horrible soapiness, right? So if that's not a case in point right there, just because I get something this wine, maybe you get something different, maybe you get something different. I mean, when I go in here, and the funny thing is everybody's like, oh, Eric's a winemaker. He pulls all these things out of thin air and has this huge vocabulary. The reality is I taste wine around people so much, I just basically plagiarize all the things I hear from everybody else around me. But
Anything we do, man.
I know. But, for me, the color, number one, is instructive to me because you can see like this kind of copper salmon color to me speaks of a well-made rosé that's not over extracted. Not if a rosé is glowing pink, I probably am going to judge it right from the get-go. Maybe because I've cut my teeth on rosés from France. Then I get in the nose, and right off the bat, I get beautiful floral characters, almost like underripe strawberries, hints of cranberry. Classic character for me is rhubarb. I grew up on rhubarb pies in New England, and I love them. I think rhubarb is a quintessential character. On the palate, a little more Bing cherry, more rhubarb again. This really nice kind of minerally chalky baking soda kind of thing happens for me, and again, I'd be curious. We're seeing a live feed while we're talking to you guys too, although it's slightly delayed. If you're getting certain things, knock them onto the feed, and we can take a look at them as we go too. I'd be really curious to see what people think about this. How about you, man? What do you get?
I immediately get this just awesome lime zest. A little bit of this rose water, and then I get this amazing kind of tangerine profile in the nose, which I absolutely love.
When you just said lime zest, it reminded me of this dessert a couple vintages ago, I was staying at Sam Pillsbury's house a ton. I just kind of lived there during harvest. And he would make this vanilla ice cream, and he put chocolate shavings, then he'd take a lime and zest it all over the top, and then put balsamic vinegar. But the little lime shavings and the zest was what stood out. I'd totally get that
Yeah.
too.
On the palate, it's beautiful. A lot of cool citrus, Meyer lemon. I get a little bit of this blood orange kind of side to it.
So that's whenever I do that, it reminds me of my brother. I think I picked that up from him.
Yeah, that's delicious. Is that your first alcohol of the day, or on? This is actually my first.
I thought you knew me
No, I
better
know.
than that.
I mean, normally I would have had a glass of wine before this one on Saturday at 5:30, but
Rosé is a daytime wine for sure. No, to be completely honest, we spent most of the day, Corey, myself, and Bree, and actually Nick, who's relatively new to our team, we were all down in the sun all day working on white blends. So we basically nailed down our white vineyard designate wines from the 19 vintage, and we came up with the Familia Blanca blend, and we did a first pass at Barrio Blanca too. So
yeah, that's awesome.
and I spit the whole time, but you basically cannot help but walk away with droopy eyes from the amount of wine that just sneaks down.
We'll
your
go to
throat,
these. We go to these portfolio tastings sometimes, and there's 300 wines you can taste, and 100 of them you can't pass up because you don't get the opportunity to taste them. We spit every single wine we taste, and still walk out of there stumbling a little bit. It's just the nature of it for sure. We got a couple people asking some questions here, man. If
Let's do it.
the cilantro thing, it's funny.
People are passionate about cilantro,
People are.
as they should be.
Absolutely. We had a guest asking about opening other bottles to drink during this. Of course, something about Page Springs that sets us apart from just about any other winery is the amount of different labels that we produce per year. Based on the vintage, we are making somewhere between 55 and 70 different labels, which one adds to the variety, 2 makes it hard to remember what's going on, 3 means that people like you at home probably have a million different options to choose from if you do have a collection of Page Springs wines. So yeah, please feel free to open any bottles and join us. Little side note, we are going to continue doing these virtual tastings. Right now we're finalizing the programming to it, but we have created 5 separate different virtual tasting packages, and we're going to be moving into those after this. But any of you guys who are following us on Instagram or Facebook you'll get the information on that as well. We got a little pause on this guy.
Stuck? Whatever.
Yeah.
Camera went to sleep.
Camera went to sleep?
Just shut off.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, everybody. Nice face, Luke.
I know, that's
Hey, Ryan, can you grab me another one of these bottles? It's the Hilltop. I just want to taste it. Just crack it. Go ahead.
I see we are
Gotta
being viewed by Cellar Dweller 12. You gotta guess who that might be?
Scarborough.
John Scarborough.
Scarborough.
Except we're paused on the one that he's following on. What's happening over here? We've got a little technical difficulties on, I believe that's the Instagram page.
Put it
So,
in a glass in here, please.
all right, we back up.
Thanks for watching.
Carrie, who's asking which bottle we opened. We opened the Rosé, which is the 2018 House Mountain Vineyard Counoise Rosé.
And then I just opened and we're about to taste the Colibri, the 2017 Colibri Hilltop Grenache. Thanks, Ryan. Quick. Thanks. You can take this back, man. Just set it over there. All right, we back up, Nick, or no?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay, but that's delayed, right? Okay, so what do you think about rolling into the next one?
Let me just finish this one real quick.
All right, you guys. So, as you saw, I went ahead and skinned this one again. I think I might be a little more of a pro than you on the skinning, man.
Yeah, can we get that?
Here, we can just go like that and sneak that back here so nobody sees it.
If anybody noticed this last round of our rosés, you're going to see that we are now packaging all of our rosés in clear glass. Are we still down?
No, it's just a
You have to
here.
reconnect.
All right, there we go.
Yes.
Yeah, in fact, they call this glass flint. You know, it's really interesting, you guys. We've been trying really hard to get 100% recycled glass. One of the things I learned recently, as I was talking to all these producers, is that they stopped calling this glass clear. If you look at it closely, there's a very slight greenish tint to it, and that's why they call this glass flint. The reason it has a greenish tint is that all of these bottles are something like 40 to 60% recycled glass, and inevitably a little bit of the green glass ends up in here because they can't completely separate it, so they end up with an imperfectly clear bottle, and they just accept it. So if you see a bottle like this that looks like it ought to be perfectly clear, but you give it kind of a sideways glance and it has a little bit of green or yellow, that's because it has some recycled glass in it, which I think is actually really cool. I'll take a non-perfect bottle that's recycled over a perfect one anytime.
Just to jump in real quick, we do make a number of other rosés. This is our Counoise rosé. We make a staple production every single year that's called our La Flor Rosa. Similar style, a little bit beefier of a body to it. This one's a little more delicate, but we also produce somewhere between like 1 to 3 other rosés every single year. So if this isn't for you, we do have other style rosés, but we take a lot of pride in our little grouping of rosés as well. So
They're really good.
yeah, we are going to do another one of these live sessions. We're actually going to do exclusively with a couple of those other rosés. So if you're into this, you should make sure to join that one with us as well. But you want to take it from here and move on to the next?
So everybody, I just opened up the 2017 Colibri Hilltop Grenache. Colibri is one of kind of our Grand Cru vineyards. It's down in the Chiricahuas, which is in extreme southeastern Arizona. This is the homeland of the Chiricahua Apache, Cochise, Geronimo, and all those kind of awesome stories of kind of pre-Anglo settlement. Colibri's at 5,200 feet. It's a rhyolitic or granitic type soil, and it's one of the highest elevation vineyards in the state. The Hilltop Grenache, we actually have 2 blocks of Grenache. Okay, the whole vineyard sits on this slope that slopes from the north at its lowest point towards the south at its highest point. And there's 2 blocks of Grenache, and there's one teeny little one called the Hilltop that's at the highest point. And this is a different clone. So if you've been drinking our Grenaches over the year, you'll see us bottling things as Grenache East, for instance. That's our big Grenache block, and there's often multiple picks. And then you'll see Hilltop. I would say that in general, Hilltop is atypical for us. It's generally, we pick it riper and richer, and again, most of our reds we finish in the high 13s to about 14, and this alcohol is 14.4, so this is a little on the ripe side for us. This wine to me is immediately, when you sniff it, it's more candied. In your mouth, it's more viscous. You can kind of feel the alcohol, but the cool thing is it doesn't necessarily burn like alcohol. And Grenache is a pretty interesting grape too. It's likely the most widely planted wine grape on the planet. There's, in Spain, which is ostensibly the homeland of Grenache, it's called Garnacha, okay? Grenache is really the French name, and the reason we use the French name is that the clone or clones that we grow came from France. So there's been a long-term battle about where Grenache actually came from, because for instance on Sardinia, the island off the west coast of Italy, they grow Grenache as well, but it's called Cananao, all right? And Cananao has been talked about in the history of Sardinia way, way back in time. So this historic battle was going on for years about, okay, is Garnacha from Spain or is Cananao Grenache from Sardinia. And it's grown all over the planet in other places, but clearly the other places like Australia, California, Arizona, there's little bits of it in Chile, Peru, Argentina, but those were clearly planted way after these original plantings or these older plantings in Spain or Sardinia. Well, it turns out genetic research did not fully illuminate this, but here's something really interesting. There are two other main types of Grenache that are basically mutations. One's called Grenache Blanc, and it's a white Grenache, and there's one called Grenache Gris, which is this gray, somewhere between black and white, is this pink grape. All right. Turns out none of those grapes are present in Sardinia, and they're all over the place in Spain. So this suggests that if this variety is mutating and interbreeding and doing different things, why aren't all these other expressions on Sardinia? The fact that there's only a single clone on Sardinia suggests that a single clone was brought over and then that was propagated over time. So there's a cluster effect of genetic diversity that's closely related to the pure Grenache Noir, which is what this is, that strongly suggests that Spain or Grenache is the homeland of this grape. It's incredibly diverse. Again, back to kind of what this tastes like. For me, this, and again, this is atypical for Page Springs. This is a pretty jammy. I'm getting caramelized notes in this. I don't think we're used to having wines this ripe. Corey and I often go back and forth. He tends to like wines a little bit riper than me. If you taste Burning Trees wines, which of course is our winemaker Corey's project, generally speaking, you'll see a little more wood influence and a little more ripeness. Beautiful wines. I tend to push us towards a little more higher acid, less oak influence, a little more food friendly. I would say that normally this would be a little closer to some of the wines that Corey loves. But back to what Luke said, 50, 60, 70 wines, there's room for all kinds of wines within our portfolio. Dark black cherries, red, super ripe red raspberries.
Wild strawberry is
oh
like
my God.
classic.
I'm getting butterscotch. I'm getting all kinds of nutty notes.
Touch of spice.
Grenache is also known to have very low tannins. So when you drink this and it rolls through your mouth and on your tongue, you're not going to get that dryness associated with some of the things you might see in Syrah, Petit Syrah, Cabernet Sauvignon. Grenache is more undoubtedly a soft, easy drinker. And our less ripe versions, which we probably make 9 or 10 times out of 10, 9 times out of 10, they're very Pinot Noir-like, and we often call it the Pinot Noir of Arizona. So.
Yeah, what's funny is with Grenache, I feel I've lived in Arizona for about 10 years, and I really kind of fell in love with Grenache in Arizona, to be honest. And what I've realized as I branch out from that appreciation for Grenache is I realize how different Grenache in Arizona is from specifically Europe. We're getting much lighter, more delicate, easier drinkers, Pinot Noir-esque. So for any of you newcomers just getting into our Grenache, they do stand out as kind of a different world, I believe. But they're beautiful in their own way,
You know what's really interesting too is that, so I started making wine in professionally in 96, 97. And when I was drinking Châteauneuf-du-Pape, so Châteauneuf-du-Pape, the southern Rhone in France, is kind of the homeland in France for Grenache. It's the dominant grape in most of the Châteauneuf blends. In the last 20 years, since I started drinking those, alcohol has crept up from 13 to 13.5 to 14 to 14.5, and now I'm seeing a lot of Châteauneuf-du-Papes finishing in the 15s. Case in point about global warming. There's no doubt, whether that's a short trend or a really long one, who knows? Excuse me. I'll avoid the COVID joke. But regions where it was already warm, wines are pushing the alcohol limits now, and they're getting ultra ripe. And meanwhile, other regions like Champagne, Burgundy, that are cooler, parts of Germany, they're actually seeing, more common, better vintages because the warmer years were their best vintages, and now they are seeing those way more frequently. So, essentially what there is a shift of these prime zones. I was in Germany on one of our cruises last year, and it was fascinating because as you go down the Mosel River, which kind of flows from west to east, I'm talking to all these wine growers there, and they're talking about how they used to only grow in the south-facing slopes because that's where it was warm enough to ripen Riesling, and now they're actually shifting onto the east-facing or the west-facing slopes to avoid the heat associated with the south slopes. I mean, amazingly, complex, interesting things going on our planet with grape growing. And I think probably another 10 or 20 years from now, we're going to see even different things. And it's one of the great things about Arizona because, essentially, what goes on in the world, grapes are grown at very specific latitudes above and below the equator. Well, in Arizona, it's really more about a elevational band, I'd say maybe somewhere about 3,000 up to about 5,500, 6,000 feet. But we can shift and we can plant. As it gets warmer, we can plant at higher elevations. If for some reason it gets cooler, we can plant at lower elevations. Same things that the Germans are doing with different slopes and aspects, because obviously south-facing slopes, because they face the sun more often, are warmer. So
Yeah, on that note, what's funny is in every wine educational book, it shows, and most of you guys have probably seen this, it's a world map with these latitudinal bands in the northern and southern hemisphere. But basically what Eric's saying here, which I've always thought, is it should almost be a little more topographical and showcase where that band actually can extend with elevation and so on. So it's nice to think about it in kind of that vertical dimension compared to two-dimensional. So
I don't know if I ever told you this story, but I don't know if anybody from Flagstaff is watching or if anybody's been to Flagstaff, but Hart Prairie, okay, so south side of the San Francisco Peaks, beautiful aspen groves, wet meadows. There was a guy named Miriam Hart. I studied him in college. He was this kind of seminal ecologist. Miriam Hart developed this thing called the life zone theory. And what he did was, from studying Arizona, he correlated the vegetation communities in Arizona based on elevational bands with latitudinal bands all the way up to northern Canada and Hudson Bay. And in fact, the very tip of the San Francisco Peaks, he calls that top elevational zone the Hudsonian zone. And that's where there's spruce and fir, like the most cold tolerant spruce and firs on the planet, and limber pines. And then you drop below that, he calls it the Canadian zone, like the good chunk of Canada, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So the cool thing about Arizona is that we essentially, from Yuma at sea level, or maybe even below sea level, to the top of the San Francisco Peaks at 12,500+ feet, we have little slices of all of North America, all here in Arizona. And that's also why I think viticulturally we have so much potential, because there's so many microclimates. You can pick anywhere on the North American continent, and we can find a little zone like that right here in Arizona. And it's pretty badass.
It's badass. We have people joining us from Flagstaff. We said it's hailing up there right now.
Can't necessarily grow grapes in the Hudson Bay, but unfortunately. So, all right, so we open this next one.
Hey, real quick. So with this Grenache, this is from our Colibri vineyard, which is down in southern Arizona. It's down in the Chiricahua Mountains. You may have mentioned that already, but we are growing Grenache both here in our home vineyard on our estate property, a very small block. We are also growing about an acre or so over on our House Mountain Vineyard, which is where the Counoise Rosé came from. That site is really special and unique. But the vineyard that this is coming from, which is our by far furthest remote vineyard from this estate property, called Colibri, is, I would guess that most of you have heard of it. It is a really, really special place to us. Just landscape-wise, it is stunning. It's gorgeous. The wildlife there is unreal. It's the property is 100% solar powered. You're completely off of the grid. There's no cell phone signal. On top of that, the soil type and the climate and the setting that wine grows in is unreal, and
it's a special place.
it's kind of like the Grand Cru vineyard, one of the Grand Cru vineyards of the States, meaning it's kind of set itself apart by continuing to showcase extremely high quality. And maybe some of you know this as well, but Arizona's only broken the 90-point barrier in Wine Spectator 2 times. Both times were wines made from grapes grown at Colibri. One of them happened to be from Burning Tree Cellars. They begged us forever to, right? Was it?
Yeah, and actually
they sent us a bunch of
we
cash.
made the wine here
and,
too. Yeah.
That's right. So.
Corey has to do us a favor someday.
That's right. How much Grenache is growing over in the hill block?
The hill block is only a half acre,
and
then the other east block is about 2.5 acres.
Yeah, this block is stunning as well. The vines are in such great uniform shape, and it is a really special place. So just wanted to point that out, and I know someone was asking about acreage there as well.
Yeah.
So.
All right, we're gonna jump into the big boys here. So, all right, everybody, we are now going to pour the Dos Padres Syrah, and one of the special things about this is that it's from clone 470, which is a clone actually from the Languedoc. So not the Rhone, but also southern France and a really important wine region. Another interesting aspect of this is that this is a whole cluster Syrah. So what does that mean? Number one, you can kind of check out this color. We've tried to ramp up here. Generally speaking, we try to taste wines from lightest to heaviest. And Dos Padres, which is actually named after my 2 fathers, my stepfather Rod and my birth father Terry. And they're also partners in Page Springs and owners at Arizona Stronghold. They own the land. If you've ever been to the Page Springs tasting room and hung out on the deck, you look across Oak Creek up at these beautiful slopes that are all kind of east facing. It's old volcanic slopes largely, and it's one of our warmest sites. So whereas Colibri is our coolest, higher acid, spicier, Dos Padres gets the most color and the most tannin. So these tend to be these bomb, like huge, rich, fat, ageable wines. Now let's bring the whole cluster into the conversation. Years and years ago in France, if you taste Syrahs from Hermitage or Crozes Hermitage, a couple of the like iconic growing regions, these are old terraces that were developed by Romans, and they still grow Syrah there. Basically, they used to just take all the grape clusters, throw them in a vat, stomp on them, and, with stems and all, and then ferment them. And these old rustic wines, these old rustic wines. Where's the measuring tape? Actually, I'm choking on a no more almonds for Eric. Anyway, these old school wines, which people still talk about, had a markedly green character to them because there were always stems in there. Okay, and maybe a criticism would be that they lacked fruitiness. Okay, and pan to the last decade or even 20 years in the U.S., Australia or otherwise, where we've focused on destemming grapes and get rid of the green matter and make much more fruit-forward wines. I mean, taste of Syrah out of Paso Robles or out of Sonoma County. They're hugely fruit-driven, massively jammy wines, okay? But I think at the same time, there's some of us who tried those wines back then and we're like, God, they were maybe too green, but they were really complex and there were some really interesting characters from those stems. So one of the things that I've encouraged our winemaking team to do over time is when grapes come in, and I do this in the field obviously too, is take the stem itself, push the grapes off it and chew on the stem too. What does the stem taste like? And every now and then we'll make a decision to leave the stems in the ferment or, maybe a portion of the stems. So we might destem a bunch of the grapes and make sure there's X amount of real fruitiness and then maybe 20% or 40% or 50% of the whole cluster grapes go in there as well, and then we ferment it as such. So there's a variety of things that happen. One is that you get flavors from the stems, which can be green, they can be spicy, they can be herbal, which is kind of cool. The other thing that happens is there's a lot of potassium salts in stems, and so it generally lowers the acidity levels in the fermentation, so that it actually softens and makes the wine perceptibly richer because there's less acid in it. So I haven't tasted this wine super recently, but in general, these Dos Padres wines are really powerful. Like I stick this under my nose right now. I'm just like, whoa.
It's huge. Yeah. I mean, right off the bat, for any of you guys just getting into this wine for the first time, it just shoots out the glass. I could smell it before I picked my glass up, to be honest. It is big and bold on the nose for sure.
Tons of tannins. And by the way, you guys, you probably heard this term applied to red wines especially. Oh, this wine's really dry. When a winemaker says dry, we mean no sugar. So dryness literally means it's done fermenting, and we can put it in a bottle and we don't have to worry about it carbonating. But as a consumer, as a wine drinker, dryness to me is often the conversation about acids and or tannins. And tannins are a group of acids. So that right now, and it depends on what you're eating too, because you won't perceive the tannins in this as much if you're eating a bunch of proteinaceous foods. Like if you're eating cheese or meat right now. So what happens is tannins are acids, okay? They come from the skins, they come from the seeds. And when you drink this wine, okay, I'm gonna do it right now. The wine goes across my tongue, and there's proteins in your saliva, and the tannins in the wine bind with the proteins in your saliva. And so if you keep drinking it and drink it and drink it and drink it, you'll overwhelm the protein in your saliva, and that tannic acid will hit your tongue raw, and it'll seem even drier. Okay, that's why a lot of times people say drink big red wines with meat or fish, or you have cheeses, because the proteins actually literally soften the perception of the wine in your mouth. Tannic acid is also what Native Americans, you've heard of tanning leather? That's using these acids, and like Native Americans use acorns. They use the acids in them to tan and soften leather, okay? So the question is, do you want to tan your tongue or not? One of the things you can do is you can age a wine, and the tannins will bind with other things in the wine, and they won't kind of hit your tongue like they do when they're young like this. Or you can have it with food, all right? Another really interesting thing is when we do tastings here at Page Springs, let's say we're assessing Syrahs, and we've got 10 Syrahs, and Luke is tasting with me, and Corey, and Bree, and a bunch of other people. We will stagger the start points of the tasters. I might start in the last wine and work my way backwards. Luke might start in the middle, Corey might start at the beginning, because you don't want to have tannin fatigue at the same time. Because if we all start on 1 and we all end on 10, everybody's always going to think that wine 10 is way more tannic than wine 1. Because what happens is you taste and taste and taste these red wines, and you overwhelm your saliva, and then eventually the tannins are hitting your tongue raw, and you go, wow, that's just way too much. So that's one of the ways we assess it. And the other thing I'll add, because I know there's a lot of people out there who, clearly you wouldn't be on this in this session if you weren't trying to learn more. One of the other things we do, if we're tasting repeatedly, is your nose tends to also fatigue as well. So I used to be a painter. I'd go back during college and I'd paint in the summertime to make money, and then I'd come back and you'd walk into a room and somebody'd be painting, and you're like, dude, or it's so strong chemically in here I can barely even smell. And they're like, what are you talking about, right? Because that paint, that chemical smell has become their background. So if you're smelling wine constantly, and all of a sudden you're like, I don't really smell much anymore, the best thing you can do is smell yourself, because either the soap you use, or your own body odor, or whatever, the detergent on your clothing, that's a reset. And so when I'm tasting a ton professionally, I always have to smell myself again. That resets my nose to the normal background, and then I go back in and the wine smells stronger again. So I encourage you to try it. Even just with these 3 wines, just doing that now, I can smell way more on this wine than I did previously. So just, some little tips about enjoying and kind of honing your senses,
Yeah, I've actually realized you can kind of back into that, and you can smell what you kind of smell like sometimes by doing that as well. Just
Yeah, and if you want like like with your computer, if you want like the hard reset, just give it the old bam, you're fresh.
I went camping last night with my 2 daughters, and this morning after we left camp, my one daughter said, "Hey, we don't smell like smoke anymore." And I actually went into this whole same explanation of what you just were talking about. So, yeah.
And back to this wine, you guys. I mean, the first time we pulled a Syrah, off of Dos Padres, I mean, the iconic Syrah on this planet is Hermitage. If you ever get a chance, unfortunately they're not super cheap. Crozier Hermitage, CROZES Hermitage, are more affordable and pretty similar. But the Syrahs there are unabashedly, not just juicy fruit, but dried fruits, dried cherries, dried blueberries. Just think of eating a dehydrated blueberry. And then all of these other things like, cocoa and bittersweet chocolate. The first time we tasted Dos Padres Syrah, it reminded Corey and I exactly of Hermitage. I mean, which we were really proud of, because we're like, damn, we pretty much, and I'm not trying to blow smoke up my own, but we were proud of Arizona to know that we could produce something as great as these wines that we had tried that are, have set, basically set the bar for Syrah in our world, and they're selling for $200, $300, $400 a bottle. This Dos Padres, this is the most. I can easily say that the Syrahs from Dos Padres, as far as ageability and like old school long term aging, these Syrahs, especially the whole cluster, are the kind of pinnacle for sure. Yeah, this just makes you want to have I know there's vegetarians out there, but for me, it just makes me want to have a big ass steak with this thing for sure.
Yeah, I'm happy to do a little sensory evaluation. I know people kind of tease at this whole side of it. I do as well. It's pretty funny to hear someone describe how a wine tastes by a childhood memory or whatever obscure thing it may be. But the more I drink wine, the more I realize how much it can relate to so much: smells, tastes, experiences, memories, buildings, cities, a million different things. So I don't know. I used to just always think it was kind of cheesy and a little pretentious when you would hear people using obscure items to describe
Flutters
wines.
of jasmine and plum.
That's right. I smell a little happiness on this one. But really, once you can kind of break down that barrier and open your mind up to your senses and truly get past that barrier, then you can really start to make serious connections across the board. So, I'm happy for your input here as well. But right off the bat, I get this kind of, it's changed a lot since we just opened this and poured this, but I get a lot of this kind of like raw cranberry juice that reminds me of the raw cranberry juice that my hippie parents used to serve me when I was a kid in Virginia, which includes the whole tannic experience that you get on the taste as well. I get a really amazing kind of cocoa powder mixed with this dried cherry or black cherry. A lot of iron. There's this kind of, again, any vegetarian, sorry, but it does have this kind of like iron, bloody side to it.
Two meat eaters for sure here. The other thing I'd encourage you guys to do too, and gals, try both nostrils. People catch me all the time and go, "Why do you do that?" I rock the wine back and forth to opposite sides of my nose because on any one day, my left or right nostril might be functioning a lot better than the other one. I mean, it's actually true. It sounds kind of corny, but you can either go for both. But if you rock it to one side, sometimes I smell way better through one side versus the other, and it's huge.
I do the exact same thing too. You'll see, again, people make fun of this as well, but people who are really into wine, you'll see them really burying their nose into their glass, which is great, and we do that as well. It's just there's a lot more to it if you think about it that way. So really exposing both sides of your nose to it. Also, not just going straight into the barrel of the cannon there for all of it. You get a lot of nuances further away off the top of the glass and off the bottom of the glass as well. You want to maybe assess the palate there on that?
Well, I can add some things too. For me, one of the classic characters I get from good Syrah is, it's going to sound crazy, but it's graphite and slate.
Absolutely.
So right now, in fact, it's funny. It brings back memories. You guys probably can't see that. That was a third grade fight where this kid stabbed me with a pencil and I've got a piece of graphite stuck in my hand there. I've carried that around since third grade. And whenever I smell graphite, back to memories, I think of this thing and I look down at my hand and go, yeah, there's that piece of pencil lead in my hand. Sorry. Anyway.
I have the same mark. It's just a different part of the body.
I was blocking when. Anyway, I think cocoa. I think there's also these really great kind of. I don't know if anybody has lived in a place on the planet where you have tons of leaves decaying on the forest floor in the fall. That beautiful smell of deciduous leaves, all brown and crinkling, layering on top of one another. I get on this, which, again, I mean that's the beauty of this. Wines are individual. Whatever you perceive and whatever moves you is what this wine's all about. It's what's going to make it special. I haven't had this wine in a while because we do make so many, and I'm like, this is awesome.
Yeah, that's delicious, man.
So, anyway.
Do you maybe want to touch, wrong bottle here, but Dos Padres, I know Eric touched on this a little bit, but this is the vineyard that has become kind of the iconic perspective from our property. Anyone who's been on our property before oftentimes kind of catches themselves looking off at our vineyard across the river compared to the one that is approaching them as they walk down to our property. Again, this is from Dos Padres. This vineyard was planted in 12, maybe, or is that right? You know, I started working here. I started working here in 2011, and I remember just watching that land get kind of ripped and cleared and planted, and the rosé comes from our House Mountain vineyard that was installed around the same time. You know, it does take a really long time, but time also flies. So it's kind of amazing to have watched those vineyards just come up in the last handful of years and be producing wines just like this.
You know, I'm looking, and we're actually already at an hour, so maybe we ought to try to answer a few questions if people have them.
Well, first, you know, anyone who has bought this package of 3 different bottles, it also came with a wine preserving spray. We're going to continue to include these because we recognize that not everyone is a professional alcoholic like Eric and I. And if you,
the really funny thing is, if you get this, you're like, oh, these guys just shipped me and charged me $12 for an empty container. Have you guys felt these things? It's like there's nothing in it, but there actually is. There actually is something inside of it.
Yeah. So, this is a blend, I believe, of argon and nitrogen. If any of you guys have ever been at a bar that has wine in it when they're starting to close, you will see any wine bar at the end of the night starting to gas their bottles. They are essentially using something like this, whether it's argon or nitrogen or a blend of that. Typically, how many days would you say you think you get out of the average bottle of wine?
Well, I think it really depends. Wines that are red and tannic. So anthocyanins, color molecules, and tannins are both antioxidants. So big red wines are gonna last longer and maybe even improve for a few days, and then start to oxidize. Atmosphere works on them. Rosés in between, lighter red wines and rosés in between, and then white wines very quickly. So it depends on the wine, but I'd say whites and rosés a day or two, light reds 2 or 3 days, big reds 3 or 4 plus. And that's the beauty of this.
Yeah, I would agree with that. With basically kind of your day 4 on a big red is where you want to be tasting it and assessing its life basically and how it still stands. Using gases like this, which we do every single day behind every single bar or every single bottle that we ever open, can extend you to about, I think you can get to about a week or so using this based off of the agitation of your bottle. So we can talk a little bit more about that. But essentially what this is doing is protecting this wine from the oxygen that wants to speed up its life cycle, essentially. So,
Yeah, I mean, so the atmosphere is largely nitrogen, but there's a little bit of oxygen. Oxygen is super reactive, and it changes wine quickly. So the heaviest gas in this argon, you spray it in there, and back to what Luke was saying about not agitating the wine afterwards. So if you're going to put it in there, try to leave the wine where it was, because the argon is going to form a little layer above the surface, and it's going to protect it. But if you move the wine around a bunch, if you put it in the door of your fridge and it's shaking, that argon is going to rock around, and the oxygen in that bottle space is going to continue to degrade it. So if you're going to use this, put your bottles where you think they're going to stay, spray it, cork it, and just leave them until you're ready to drink them again.
I'm just seeing that some people are saying that they didn't get any of the wine preserving spray. If you happen to pick up these bottles individually for this tasting, then the spray would not have been included. But if you did get the package and for some reason you didn't get this, just let us know and we'll ship it out your way.
Yeah, we also ran out briefly last week. So, supply chains around the world are all messed up right now. We have a bunch in-house now. So when we talk about the next, the future rounds of these virtual tastings, we've got a lot more in-house.
So just a little bit about how this works, I guess scientifically, will give you a better understanding of just why you would want to use it.
And don't try to inhale it. It's not nitrous oxide. There are no benefits whatsoever.
What? Yeah. No,
That's why they're all empty when they get to you guys. Oh, sorry.
Have you ever bought the whipped cream from the grocery store and then it doesn't work at all and clearly someone went in there and got it?
Goddamn kids.
So simply put, this is heavier than the oxygen that is filling this space right here. So all that we are doing with this spray is spraying some in there and allowing that to settle. And what that does is it creates, again, this is heavier than the oxygen that was inside of that. So as we spray that in, it settles and creates a buffer layer between the wine and the oxygen that is trying to speed up the life cycle of this wine here. The more of this that you spray into this bottle, then the more of a blanket that you will get. So essentially, if you sat there and sprayed more and more of this into there, you are eventually going to fill this up with this argon and nitrogen blend, pushing out that oxygen. So if I were to just use a little bit of this spray and put it in this bottle and set it down and never move it again, that small little blanket of argon in there is going to do the job. But every time that this happens with that bottle, every time that that wine is splashed around or you take this bottle into the other room or pick it up, it is essentially allowing that blanket to be displaced and allow that wine to touch that oxygen. So the more of this you use, the bigger that blanket becomes. But if that bottle is just sitting there, you actually don't need very much of it. When we do argon application from behind our bar, we're typically, I would say we're adding about that much or so.
Yeah, and read the bottle because it talks about it. I mean, really.
Oh, you're supposed to read the.
I know, right? The blanket doesn't, like, back to what Luke is saying, the blanket doesn't need to be that thick. If it's just that thick, it works just as well. So you can preserve the life of this longer.
Yeah, yep.
All right.
Should we answer a couple of questions and see what's going on? just so you guys know, following us live, we've had a couple different little monitor displays here for us to kind of be able to see any of the live engagement there. One of the cool ones for me personally is to see my brother joining on from Asheville, North Carolina, who I never get to see at all. So it's kind of a cool little live family interaction for me. GalenFrostBernard.com, some amazing artwork. How was that plug right there? All right, let's hop back here. What I'll probably try to do here is maybe manage the questions and let Eric answer most of these here. So I know we had a question about acreage. Do you maybe want to just touch on how many acres we grow and how that's changed?
Yeah, number one, I'd encourage you to go to our website and look at the vineyard section, because just a couple years ago I updated all that, and basically I talk about our quote unquote estate program, and there's 4 vineyards in our estate. There's the home vineyard, which is right here at the winery. There's Dos Padres, which we just tasted the Syrah from, across the river to the west of us. And then to the kind of northeast of us is House Mountain, which is on the flanks of the House Mountain volcano. It's a joint venture between us and the Petnick family over on the DA Ranch. And then last but not least, Colibri down in southeastern Arizona. So Colibri is 9-ish acres. Dos Padres is 8 to 9 acres. House Mountain's 8 acres, and then we've got about 4 to 5 here, right here at the home. So, technically speaking, based on our production, we can produce all of our wines from our own estates, but because we're high-functioning ADD and we like to make wines from other vineyards, we sell about 25% of our fruit to other people. Like classic examples are Burning Tree, Chateau Tumbleweed. Of course, all those guys all used to work here. Sometimes we sell a little bit to Rune, James Callahan. And then we buy a little bit of fruit too, because there's opportunities for us to try other cool varieties that are grown other places. We've made beautiful wines from Coronado vineyards on the east side of Wilcox. We buy from our kind of sister winery and vineyard, Stronghold. We pick up things from there. Nebbiolo rosés we made. We get Chardonnay. We sometimes get Cab and Merlot. Jim Graham's vineyard at Golden Rule, we buy Sangiovese from. So, it's kind of like being a painter and wanting to have new colors on your palette. It's always nice. And you're also, from a financial perspective and an agricultural perspective, you're hedging a little bit. So, that's kind of the whole portfolio. And we've even picked up grapes just over the border in New Mexico here and there, because there's some really neat vineyards over near Lordsburg and Deming. It's usually a small percentage, but I'm basically, as Corey would say, sometimes I'm a little bit of a grape slut, and if there's some cool grape out there, I just can't resist it, like Uni Blanc. Uni Blanc is what, I don't know, I'll go into it. Go ahead. That's it. Lots of cool grapes in the world, and I can't resist them.
Another question that we have here is when we're going to be open. It's a pretty big open-ended question, to be honest. Right now we are actually open. It's just a matter of how we are open. When we're going to be opening our doors back, I think it's going to be a pretty similar answer that you're going to get from any business owner right now. We're basically just kind of taking it day by day and just wishing and hoping and trying to be smart about things. But we are extremely excited to have our doors open as well. Outside of that, we are open now with the to-go window. Our property is open. The to-go window can do curbside if you want to just come by and pick up a bottle and head back home.
And what's really cool too is, back to the points we made earlier, we spread all of our picnic tables and tables all around the property. And you can literally sit down anywhere 50, 100 feet from other people. It's no different than going to a park or going on a hike somewhere. So if you want to grab a bottle and some food at the to-go window, you can then go out and have a totally private, intimate experience. It's kind of weird, actually, how quiet it is around here these days. So, but by all means, eventually we'll ramp out of this thing again. But in the meantime, I think it's extremely safe and hugely just tranquil, placid, and beautiful around
We have another question about YouTube as well. So to give you guys a heads up of what's coming up with this virtual tasting, I mean, hopefully this is a success for you guys as well. I know that sitting here and drinking wine with Eric is, and being paid for it is a big success. But I mean, just honestly getting to hang out and sip through these awesome wines is great. But so we're going to continue this program further down the road. We are going to create a little bit of a gap between our next session because of shipping, the time of shipping, the time we want to give people to be able to order these wines. But that information will be coming out very soon in the next couple days. We've basically broken down virtual tastings into a series of a number of our select wines, a number of our signature wines, our rosés, there's a couple kind of obscure pairings as well. And then we're excited to continue this and expand it by a number of different means. Of course, food involved with wine is a huge one. And if you know us personally at all, you know that we don't just drink wine. We have an extreme appreciation for wine. I would say that extends into all other alcohol for me. I mean,
We'll probably.
vodka
before-
for me is like
before I
doesn't
talk about
really
cocktails
go
and
here,
food.
but you know, we're really excited to continue this program. So we're gonna promote all of those in the next couple days via if you're on our mailing list, if you're within our wine club, if you are following us on Facebook or Instagram.
Yeah, and I just want to, something really important about what Luke just said. One of the challenges of being here in Arizona is that, you know, it may be perfect temperature up here at Page Springs, but all of our shipments go through Phoenix. Okay, so we are getting really close to the window where shipping wines through Phoenix is a huge risk. Because the last thing we want you to do is get a bunch of cooked wine and sit here and we're going, oh, this wine's great, and you're like, oh, this stuff really sucks. So because of that, I mean, sometime around the first week of May is usually where we start cutting off shipping, and we don't ship to most of the country. It doesn't matter whether the temperature is okay where you are, it's about the conditions of transit. So what we're doing is you'll check out our website, check out, you know, all the platforms we have to communicate with you. Call if you want. We're going to put together the full package of virtual tastings from now to when we think we're all going to be free human beings again. And you can order a case, actually it's 11 bottles plus a bottle of wine preserver now, so that you can get it before it gets too hot, and then we feel good about the wines that you're going to get. So, and we're off of, you know, just because we want to incentivize it, you'll get an additional discount on that. If you're a wine club member, your member discounts will apply on top of that. But the most important thing is take a look at what we have to offer. If you want to just get one little piece of that, totally cool. If you want to go for the full Monty, now's the time to do it. And in fact, I believe the date, if you're out of state, like East Coast, Chicago, you know, Seattle, I believe the date to order by so that you get it for those tastings is somebody in the room.
April 25th.
April 25th. If you're in Arizona, of course, you can come pick it up from us. We can ship it to you much quicker if you don't want to come up here.
Yeah, any of the dates that we're putting out for these wines to be shipped out, you got to think about how we are also shipping to the East Coast. So any of these deadlines for shipping is because of the high end of that scale of the amount of days that we need to ship that wine to you. So,
like for instance, I think my father is watching this right now. He's in Chicago and he didn't get his wines because of a UPS mess up. So yeah, it's a bummer. And you know, and as far as the wines that we're going to look at in these, there's going to be a lot of really cool wines. Like Luke said earlier, a rosé flight. We're going to do the Familia brother and sister, the red and the white. We're going to do La Serrana, El Serrano. We've got a kind of alter ego flight of you know, Mule's Mistake, I think, and Tyrol to go. So, and the idea is to use these wines. We're going to enjoy them together. We can talk about, you know, what we're perceiving in these, but there'll be different stories, just like today, that will kind of weave in. Like, for instance, I just learned recently. I was doing some research for today. It turns out Teraldigo and Grenache are related. Teraldigo is a grandparent or a great grandparent of Grenache, which I never knew. So we're gonna jump into that later in the week. But just know that like if you've ever come to one of our events or done anything with us, it's not just about drinking wine and getting a buzz on. It's about drinking wine, getting a buzz on, and learning something as well. And just, you know, and that's all about deepening your experience with wine. It's about deepening your experience with different places that these wines came from, those cultures and those people and those landscapes. So, you know, I'm glad we can still do this and reach out to people and connect. And, you know, we're still open, you guys, in the way that Luke talked about. And we hugely appreciate your support during this time. And not just us, I have tons of friends and friends' families who are in this business. And right now, it's all about trying to support small business. The more you can do, you know, let's try to keep our lives normal. And let's still, you know, let's still eat and drink and smile and camp and rejoice and have a good time, you know?
Yeah,
So-
absolutely. You know, there's a lot of people on here that I'd love to shout out and say hey to. We got people asking if they can come drink with us right now. But you know what's
We
amazing?
will do a cocktail session at some point, you guys.
What's amazing about this place here is that there is just this innate family that is created around Page Spring Cellars, and what Eric has created here for us. For me, being kind of new to the area, everyone, you know, I know half of you guys commenting on here, and I'm excited to see you when our doors open again, and I'm stoked to have you guys involved with these virtual tastings. You guys make this a real thing, and we're happy to do it for you. So,
Hey, I just saw something. What would you pair with a Grenache? Mushrooms. Think of anything. Look up Pinot Noir. Anything that goes well with Pinot. So, mushrooms and chicken and lighter meats. Go for it. Like mushrooms, especially great with Grenache. Awesome.
darker.
Yeah.
I think Dean Pafanis is asking if he can come drink with us. I'm not sure if that's who Verde Valley Wine Trail is, but you know, maybe I'll leave you a bottle on your doorstep and ring the doorbell and run, man. So keep your ears out.
I know how much these two. This is great. Oh my God.
So again, you guys, thanks for joining us. Extremely happy to have you virtually and to be able to interact. We're going to be doing more of these down the road, and we're happy to have you back and are excited to be involved as well. Probably a different setting next time, maybe different people. We'll see.
Yeah, we're gonna mix it up for sure. Vineyards, you know, weird, strange places. We'll do it.
Yeah. Thank you guys.
Yeah.
Enjoy your
Thanks.
wine.
Thanks for your support, you guys.